Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe DeMuro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hello, folks. My name is Zoe DeMuro, and I am honored to be your host for Choice, Your Creative Superpower. If you're coming back, it's good to see you again. And if this is your first time, welcome to the show. So today, in episode 2, we'll be exploring the relationship between choice and identity. So, speaking of identity, I'll go with some roles. I am a religious science practitioner and president of the board of trustees at the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living in Oakland, California. And I'm a transformational coach. So to start things off, let's talk about what identity is, which is actually no small task in and of itself. We can go with a dictionary definition, be something along these lines. The condition of being a certain person or thing, or the set of characteristics by which a person or thing is definitively recognizable or known. Okay. As is the case with most dictionary definitions, it doesn't really help us understand the way that this relates to us as people. So let's talk about this. How do you define your identity? Maybe it's your name. An answer to the question, who is this? Your name might be absolutely sufficient to identify you. But that's a far cry from the question, who are you? That's one we're going to come back to later. But let's talk about names for a bit. Certainly at times, that's all we need to identify ourselves. You know, back in the old days of dial telephones, when you called someone, that was pretty much the first thing you did after they said hello. You said, hi, this is Zoe. Of course, nowadays, that might very well be done for you by technology through caller IDs and contact lists. But your name alone only works to identify you to people who know you by name or know of you by name. Let's assume they don't. What would be another way to identify yourself? Oftentimes, it's through a relationship. So a relationship, let's say to a person. Hi, I'm Ann's brother, or an organization. Hi, I'm Zoe DeMuro. I'm from the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living, or a cause. Hi, I'm with the committee to re-elect so-and-so. Folks, don't re-elect so-and-so. Select somebody good. Well, we actually choose which way to identify ourselves based on a role or on circumstances or a desire sometimes to be viewed in a particular light. So I might say, hi, this is Zoe DeMuro. I'm the president of the board of trustees because I feel that might hold more sway with some people. Or I might say, I'm the owner of the Snooze Comfy Motor Lodge. Okay, I'm not. Believe me, I'm not. In case you know the Snooze Comfy Motor Lodge. Or I might say, I'm the person that made that necklace you've been admiring on Jessica. That one actually might be true because I do make beaded jewelry. So in just these few moments, you've learned several things about me. You've learned more about how I identify myself. I identify myself through my name. I identify myself through my roles. I identify myself through my relationships. I identify myself through circumstances. how we choose to identify ourselves may well be based on specific circumstances that we find to be advantageous or disadvantageous. Could be our assumptions about another person. Could be looking for a desired outcome. So many different possibilities, and many of them are actually influenced by who we have chosen to believe the other person to be. In fact, I want to turn this around and look at it from the other person's side, because they make choices about who we are as well. So, for example, if I'm talking to the person who admired the jewelry, they might choose to think of me as being creative or interesting. If I'm talking to the person about the motor lodge and they had a great time when they stayed at the motor lodge, their choices about me might very well be really accepting and open. Whereas if they had a poor experience, they might think, this is someone I need to be wary of. So even if we look at names, a name does make a difference. For example, let's say someone introduces himself as Henry Bledsoe Wellington III. Well, you'll probably think differently about that person than if he had said his name is Hank. Hank might be seen as a wonderfully approachable person at your backyard barbecue, but Hank might be viewed as less than or somehow inappropriate at a formal state dinner, just as Henry Bledsoe, etc., might be viewed as a real stuffed shirt at your barbecue. In my case, my name's Zoe. That's definitely the result of a series of specific and well thought out considerations, since that is not the name my parents gave me. I actually changed my name legally quite a few years ago because I wanted to reflect a choice that I made to integrate all aspects of my life that were fundamental to my identity. Now, what in the world does that mean? This is kind of a strange and convoluted mashup of people and circumstances that explain this. So bear with me. Years ago, I was dating this woman who was convinced I looked like one of her favorite movie stars, Lorenzo Lamas. She was either really complimentary or needed glasses, but who was I to argue? As is often the case with multi-syllable names, she eventually shortened it to Zoe. I liked the sound of that. So I introduced myself as Zoe from that point onward. And it probably would have been replaced at some point by a different nickname. I've had quite a few of them. Except that one day when I was walking through a market in San Francisco's Japantown, I heard this little voice call out, Zoe, Zoe. I was like, wow, who knows me here? I turned around to see this little guy pulling on his mom's arm. He was pointing at this picture of an elephant on an appliance. And the brand name was Zojirushi. Okay, now this is where it starts to get really kind of odd. At this time, I was working on a film script. My job was to take dialogue and poetry, which had been translated from Spanish into English, and ensure that it was not only proper colloquial English, but that it held true to the intent of the authors, specifically for the poet. Now, my Spanish was just adequate. So I spent a lot of time reading Spanish language dictionaries because I wanted to understand the nuance of the original Spanish words to get the best English word. So there I was, surrounded by all these dictionaries at the library. I don't know how many of them I had out. And I decided to look up Zojirushi. So I grabbed a Japanese dictionary. And it turns out, actually it was a Japanese to English dictionary in this case. Turns out that it translates to being elephant mark or elephant sign. So Zoe meant elephant. Now, just happened to be I had recently been given a book about totem animals. And I had identified the elephant as my totem animal because it has really strong familial ties. Its physical strength is coupled with a gentleness and a nurturing and protective nature, all qualities that I admired. Hence it was my totem. Now the final piece falls into place. I was given a storybook about elephants, and I found the story of the blind men who came across an elephant and tried to understand what this being was by experiencing different aspects of it. So by touching its ear, they thought it was like a palm leaf. Touching its leg, they thought it was like a tree. Its trunk was like a snake. Its tusk like a spear. But obviously none of these characteristics could come close to defining what this creature was. So here I was. I was known by some people as an editor, or a poet, or an artist, or a corporate techie, or a teacher, or a dad, but no one had the complete picture of who I was. So I decided that unlike the elephant, I had the ability to fully express myself, to show who I was, and how all these different aspects made up my identity. I could choose how I presented myself to the world. So I created a covenant with myself, and I suppose with the universe. I legally changed my name to Zoe so that I would always have that reminder of the values which have such a profound effect on the choices I make. More than simply finding a cool name, it became a catalyst for change that went far beyond an identifier. These days, to know me is to know a person who endeavors to bring all of who he is to every situation, to every enterprise. If someone has no idea what your name is, they still might have what they believe to be indicators of your identity. Could be the relationships you've formed and nurtured. Could be statements you've made. Could be your political affiliation, your spiritual beliefs. Or it could be based on factors you did not specifically choose at all, and over which you really have no control. Your height, your race, your socioeconomic class, your gender by birth. You may even choose to hide or downplay aspects of your own identity. For example, if you're going to see a football match in Manchester, you might want to hold off showing the all-red kit of Liverpool until you're seated with your fellows. Okay, now for those of you who are not into football, soccer, if you're a Dodgers fan and you're coming up here to the Bay Area, hanging out with Giants, keep the blue quiet for a bit. Right? Your choice, though. On a more serious note, when identity deals with a core aspect of how you see yourself in the world, it can be freeing or terrifying to express it. One of the things that I hope is very clear to one and all is that choice is and should be a very personal decision. Our choices so significantly affect our experience of life. So what could be more personal than our identity? Now, having said that, there are definitely times when our ability to make a personal choice can become exceedingly difficult. Now, we just ended Pride Month in many parts of the world. And as a cisgender heterosexual male and an ally, I can say that it's sad and frankly painful to know that so many people feel the need to choose to hide their sexual orientation or gender identification. I say sad and painful because we all deserve to be exactly who we are. We all deserve to be able to express exactly who we are. Now, that's a pretty bold statement if you think about how you go through your daily life. Now, if you're fortunate enough to belong to a so-called norm, that is to say, exhibiting characteristics that are seen as commonplace or typical, subjectively, you actually deal with significantly less identity-related stress. But if you should find yourself in a different setting, a different community, a different part of the world, and so on, the norm can shift. And with it, so goes your comfort. It's a situation I faced a number of years ago. Small example of this. I used to live on the outskirts of a very sketchy part of this one town a number of years ago. It's a place that had very high crime rate, a lot of drugs, and a lot of violence. At that time, the job that I had required that I wear a suit and tie. And I knew from unfortunate experience that dressed that way, walking through that neighborhood, I could be seen as a target because I clearly didn't belong. So I chose to be sure to make sure that I would always change into a style of dress that would let me blend in. I'd be less visible in essence to avoid being targeted. Clothes I wore were the clothes I liked, but they were still camouflage in effect because I chose to hide an aspect of my identity to make things easier. Now, if that concept sounds familiar to you, I'm sorry, truly. Especially if we're talking about a core aspect of your identity. Changing clothing that's nothing, that's simple. But when we're talking about core elements of your identity that deal with one's race, one's culture, one's religious or spiritual affiliation, one's sexual preference or gender identity, now we're talking about a dissonance that can lead to extremes as intense as depression and, unfortunately, even death. What a tremendous injustice. What a tremendous injustice to have other people's choices, to have your choices rather about your personal identity subjugated by the choice of others, labeling you as wrong or unnatural in some way. We have a responsibility to ourselves to align with our truth, to align with our true self. There's a lot of work that goes into that at times. And choice is something that becomes very complex when we look at these influences. For example, if you belong to a particular religious group or a political group, there might very well be values and beliefs that have shaped those groups, are indicative of those groups. And so choosing to belong to them, to identify yourself as a member of that group, is effectively choosing their perspectives, their values, their preferences, and possibly even their biases. So bias is an interesting word. We tend to think of it as a negative quality of perhaps the unenlightened. But the reality of it is all choice reflects, at the very least, preference. And quite honestly, it can be a slippery slope from preference to bias. There's even bias that presumes positive characteristics. It's called the halo effect, whereby if you feel positively towards a person or a group or a movement, you tend to believe whatever is good and feel distrustful or dismissive of whatever is negative. In fact, the more strongly you identify yourself with a particular affiliation, you might actually make fewer choices and simply go with the group consensus because that affiliation becomes integral to your identity. That is a choice. requires discernment. It requires your ensuring yourself that you are living according to your values. When I was on my own spiritual quest to find a community I felt would be most effective for me to lead a fulfilling life, I looked at every aspect of each community I could to get a better sense of what I'd be aligning with, a better sense of what I'd be identifying with. My choice was absolutely tied to my identity. And I wanted to be really certain before I said I was a religious scientist, for example, that the principles and beliefs of the philosophy of science of mind resonated with me, that they felt inviting, that they put aside dogmatic edicts, and instead they opted for open dialogue, and they encouraged exploration. Yes, obviously, it all works for me. So choice and identity can become extremely complicated and even emotionally draining, damaging, if you're constantly faced with the choice to show or hide who you truly are. And of course, the worst extreme is being seen as unacceptable or less than by virtue of who you truly are, and then suffering as a result of the choices other than that others have made about your identity. I believe that as we learn more and more about ourselves, we desire all the more to be known for who we are. But that desire may very well be tempered by concerns for rejection and even safety. And so we choose how we are willing to let the world see us. There's also people who become overly concerned with how the world sees them, what their reputation or legacy might be. Should they become too fixated on how others view them, the choices they make about their identity can have a profound effect on their life as they struggle to maintain the persona they've chosen. It's also important to recognize, however, that identity continues to evolve over the course of a person's life, which makes considering that we are hopefully constantly changing, constantly growing, constantly working towards being the person we truly are. Okay. Dr. Shahram Heshmat wrote this about the basics of identity. He said, the ultimate goal for individuals is to develop and nurture those choices that are consistent with their true self. To deny the true self is to deny the best within us. To find more happiness in life means to live in harmony with one's true self. I think the doctor has stated it perfectly. Excuse me. All too often, people lose sight of one of the most crucial choice points in life. Choice point being a time at which you recognize that you actually have a choice to make. So they can lose sight of that, this opportunity to choose who they truly are. Yes, there are circumstances, there are conditions that shape our identity. But we are co-creators of our life experience. In the philosophy of science of mind, we strive to see and align with our true self. We believe that each of us was brought into being from the same source, the same creator. So our identity is far more than the human construct that walks this earthly existence. Each of us is a unique, individualized expression of the one, of loving spirit. Blessed with this life, and more so, blessed with free will to choose how we show up in this world. So I encourage you to look at your identity, how you present yourself. Look at yourself. Look at your relationships. Look at your roles. Look at the assumptions that you have made as to how people view you. Look at the assumptions you make as to how you view other people. What choices can you make going forward that will keep you in the greatest alignment with your truth? And yes, I understand that there will be struggle. Absolutely. But this is one of the things that we are doing here at the New Thought Media Network. We are looking to provide encouragement, education. We want people to understand more and more about who they are and their place in this world. The more that we can be truly ourselves, the more that we can understand our identity, the more that we can choose to show up in this world, to do and to be who we truly are, the greater the possibility that we can indeed create a world that works for everyone. Nothing that is truly good in one person's life can be anything other than good in everyone's life. So I encourage you to spend time looking around the New Thought Media Network. We have so much going on here. This is a global enterprise, folks. We provide prayer several times a day. We provide meditation, contemplation, information, so much more. So, for example, today, 1 o'clock, Mountain Time, I want you to check out Finding the Joy in the Journey with practitioner and very nearly minister, now that she's finished her exams, the exceptional Gina Calvario Krupka. Joy in the journey, just spectacular. So I want to thank you for spending this time with me. And I want you to really enjoy the process of making wise choices. So until we meet again, I want to say much love and many blessings, and be who you are. Thank you so much.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.